Ahoy! We finally have a ton more information about Charybdis. In the data mining previously there wasn't really all too much stuff and it seemed like all of the information was wrong or misleading, just because it didn't really make sense for Hi-Rez to release 3 majors in a row, but now we finally have a trailer as well as information from the closer look. So we're going to talk about both of that. First, let's roll the trailer and have a look at that.
There once was a girl who lived in the sea. She's born from the depths. She'll never be free. And every fish, each creature and man who laid eyes on her was not seen again.
Mother, it's only a story, right?
Right! Right! On the right!
Gods, protect me. And now, your story ends.
Now, I have a few thoughts on the character design, but we'll get to that in a second. What I will say though is that as usual, the trailer looks absolutely gorgeous. The animations and everything was done really well, and I think it really creates hype for new characters. The reason why I don't want to talk about the design just yet is because Hi-Rez has kind of released a statement about the design themselves in the closer look, so we can go right into that and then that'll cover that as well. This comes with a little bit of an introduction beforehand. Who is Charybdis? The ceaseless whirlpool, a Greek physical hunter. I know from the trailer you could think it's maybe an assassin as well. It is a hunter indeed, but there are some more specifics regarding that, which we'll get to later. And the heroes, seized by anguish, left the sirens, but other perils still worse, destructive to ships, awaited them in the meeting place of the seas. For on one side appeared the smooth rock of Scylla, on the other Charybdis ceaselessly spouted and roared. Many ancient Greco-Roman poets have written about the dangerous duo lurking in the waters of the Strait of Messina. Homer, Virgil, and many lesser-known writers have shared these warnings, and they struck terror into the hearts of adventurers. Scylla and Charybdis are always described together, on opposite sides of the narrow strait. They are bound here by destiny, inflicted on them by the gods. There are phrases used in many different cultures to describe difficult situations with no clear right answer. Between a rock and a hard place, on the haunts of dilemma, catch-22, the lesser of two evils, between Scylla and Charybdis. Our vision. Charybdis left us plenty of room to creatively interpret the mythology. We know there are many different opinions in the community over how she should be depicted, and we heavily considered all of these different options. Ultimately, we wanted to stay true to the idea of Scylla and Charybdis as a duo. This is their primary literary description and a strong relationship in itself. They're not technically related depending on the source material, but felt clearly justified to symbolically design them as sisters. Therefore, Charybdis would also be a child, the daughter of Poseidon. As Scylla would hide her monstrous form under the ground, so would Charybdis, but in a different manner. Scylla is the princess, she wields magical power, she's a little unhinged and creepy, and she can cause a lot of damage. Charybdis is the sportswoman. She wields physical power, she is cold and calculating, and she can cause a lot of damage. Scylla has a multitude of dog-headed snake limbs in place of her legs. Charybdis has a single large-mouthed monster in place of her left arm, hidden underneath a royal cloak. They are opposites in many ways except for the base visual direction. They both consider themselves as monsters, but they utilize their abilities to disguise themselves as an additional advantage. Now we get to the reason why I didn't talk about the design yet. Note to the SMITE community. We know some of you out there might be wishing that she was 100% monster with no human form. Very few of her gods have so much flexibility in the depiction. Usually, there is a pretty clear visual direction to take. With that flexibility comes the downside of players being disappointed that their preferred direction was not chosen. This goddess was always planned to be a physical hunter, decided well before our teaser trailer was released at the Season 7 World Championships, and she was always planned to be designed akin to Scylla. We saw that data mining labeled her as magical, and we aren't exactly sure why that was. Perhaps they only were able to get the very earlier prototype version, which our gameplay team uses to set up the basic ability functions. At that time, all stats and damage types are often totally wrong, as a game designer will do a pass later and configure them all correctly. Over time, we have changed the way we packaged assets, possibly making it harder to get the information. We hope people don't feel misled by this, and we just want to remind the community that data mining is not an official source. This direction is what got her through our god greenlight process. The dev team as a whole was more excited about this option than the full monster one, and our player metrics and research led us to trust that a large part of SMITE fans would be happy with this direction as well. Tiamat was a true non-human goddess launched earlier this year, and we wanted Charybdis to be strongly differentiated from her. Now at this point I want to say a few words in between. If you're surprised that she is not in fact an artillery mage, that's kind of on you. We knew that something was weird about the data mining from the start. I said this many times, because the 3 releases that we had would have to be an assassin, hunter and a guardian, which was promised, meaning the only way that she could have even been magical at all is if she was the guardian, or we would have gotten another magical hunter. And while the guardian option was technically there, it never really made sense, with Atlas likely being one of the gods this year and Atlas not really being a good fit for an assassin or for a hunter. But there was no scenario in which she could have even been another mage after 2 mage releases, unless Hi-Rez would have released another secret god in order to fill every role, because they promised to fill every role this year. So that part is neither surprising nor bad to me. I think that she is a great fit for a hunter, and I thought that was the most likely outcome here, so that works for me. When it comes to the design choice, I gotta say that they are making a lot of very weird, I don't want to say excuses, but a lot of strange reasonings coming together. First of all, one of the reasonings is that she is Scylla's sister, which she is in some variations of mythology, and that therefore she has to look the same, which doesn't really make sense to me. Like, just because she's her sister, she doesn't have to be the same age, she doesn't have to have the same style and everything, and in many ways, we get to the model a little bit later, she does kind of look like a slightly edgier copy of Scylla, like it's down to almost the exact proportions. Hairstyle, I guess, is slightly different than hair color, but it's just minor things. And the base model that they based her on, which we'll also see, is also Scylla. So I don't understand why that was necessary. I think there are many ways in which they could have displayed that they are sisters without necessarily having to be twin sisters, basically. Like, it's not like she could not have had an older sister. Instead, they chose to go with this semi-chibi design again, that they went for Scylla as well. And I personally don't like it. I don't like these children designs that some gods have. I think that's the case for Cupid, for Scylla, and now for Charybdis. I just don't like that style. Otherwise, I think her design is actually cool. I like her cloak. I like the way that she utilizes her undersea monster on her arm and everything. I just think it wasn't necessary to put that on a child model, and really nothing in her story would force it to be that way. Likewise, if the goal was to depict her as Scylla's sister, they also could have done something like make her a moving whirlpool, and her head just pokes out a little bit, and that's how you recognize her as Scylla's sister, and then she's kind of like an anglerfish with a human part that, again, looks similar to Scylla, and then there's a huge maw that comes out underneath when she attacks or something. I don't know. Many options there. My main point is that the way they're framing this basically makes it sound like they almost had no other options to design her differently and get this message across, and that really isn't the case. There's a lot of room for creativity in which this could have been done. They just wanted her to be this child model as a hunter for some reason, and that's what they went with. And that's okay. Maybe that sells better, maybe that's the reason why they did it. At the end of the day, I don't have to understand it or prefer it, because for me it comes down to how a character plays and not how their model looks like from the back. What I hope is that Hyris learns a little bit of a lesson from this, because I think what led to this confusion and the assumption that she would be a monster was primarily the teaser trailer in the beginning of the year that just made it look like she is going to be this massive whirlpool monster. No, I know that these trailers are meant to just depict the general vibe or something along those lines. They're not exactly meant to depict the character, which was also the case with Morgan Le Fay. But I think it could have been done smarter in a way that it's not as misleading. Just put a little shadowy figure in there as well or something, just to make it clear that there is going to be some humanesque part, and if that's what you do, then it'll be clear to the players that it's not just a monster and a maw, and then the speculation is not even going to go in that direction. So I think ultimately Hyris still planted the seed for this idea here. And now with that out of the way, let's talk about the more interesting stuff in my opinion, which is her overall design theme and abilities. Core themes. Theme: Dangerous Seas. Charybdis is the embodiment of thalassophobia, the dangers that lurk below the water's surface. She's a sea monster, a whirlpool, and a goddess of the ocean's royal family. Charybdis is confident and fierce, but her powers are invisible at first glance. She has learned to control her curse and conceals a massive monstrous maw underneath her cloak. Personality: vengeful and cold. Charybdis has been cursed by the gods and trapped underwater for centuries. She feels an intense anger towards those who brought her this fate, although she maintains a cool and calculating presence. Perspective: trouble. The gods don't know whose side Charybdis is on, they just know that her and Scylla are violent, unpredictable, and back with a vengeance. Artistic process. As mentioned in the community notes, this was not an easy process. We had an array of thematic, technical, and creative constraints to abide by. We wanted Charybdis to feel specifically unique from Scylla, but still clearly thematically related to her. We started with a rough exploration of the girl form, ranging from some more dark gothic styles to the very regal and fantastic. We also explored how our monster forms would manifest themselves. This involved different sizes and shapes, or using one arm or two arms. As we progressed through the iterations, we had found the right balance for the girl. She was designed to live up to the title of Daughter of Poseidon. For these reasons, she has royal elements as well as aquatic references in her visuals. We focused on the royal tunic, staying away from the princess dress that Scylla wears. Charybdis is a hunter. She is more likely than Scylla to venture out with her father on matters of duty or sport. She was eager to venture into the wild, train in combat, and eavesdrop on politics. She's dressed more for those occasions and is always shown holding one of her trusty daggers. As a hunter, we wanted a new and fresh ranged weapon, and the dagger was a cool throwing weapon that fit well with her visuals. I'm personally very happy about that part. I always wanted to have a character with throwing daggers. I thought it would be cool for a short-ranged assassin as well, but I'll take a hunter with that as well. We then started more specific iterations on the monster, who we had started referring to as the Maw. To contrast with Scylla, we designed the monster to be a single larger entity instead of multiple smaller ones. We wanted the character to be based on aquatic creatures in form and detail, but with some clearly supernatural features. Here we have our final Charybdis concept. We knew that the tech behind the modeling, animating and rigging the monster was still going to be a challenge going forward. One thing we thought about a lot was the scale. We wanted this thing to be as big as possible to really fit with the thematic goals of a monster that generates massive whirlpools. We also wanted her to be able to interact with it in a variety of non-combat scenarios where the maw has a smaller form. The fantasy behind being able to hide a giant monster under her cloak justifies its ability to change its size. This is a magical property the maw has, which is also something akin to sea creatures like the pufferfish, except this one has a giant terrifying set of teeth. Charybdis is almost the amount of work for two completely separate gods, with the added technical challenge of tying them together. We as a team are very proud of the final results. Charybdis is a hunter using ranged physical attacks to deal a lot of damage through basic attacks. Being a hunter, she would most likely excel in the duo lane along with a tanky support character. Charybdis' strength comes from her basic attacks, and she mostly lacks ability damage outside of her ultimate. The most recent hunters to be added have felt more skewed towards the ability side, so we specifically wanted Charybdis to play more towards the basic attack side. She also has generally less range than a normal hunter. Her abilities complement this playstyle, so positioning herself right at the edge of basic attack range is the key to mastering Charybdis. Now, at this point, you may have noticed that she is mentioned to not be ability based, but rather basic attack based, but also have a shorter range than most other hunters. Now, this doesn't specify if the basic attack range is actually shorter or if this is more about the abilities. I'm assuming that the projectile will at least be towards the shorter end of hunter ranges. There's like a small difference between some of them depending on the projectile point. And this could actually be a bit of a problem, right? If you hear these parts together, then you have a hunter that relies on basic attacks but also has short range, which would make it super hard for them to apply damage. And that is where the unique gameplay features come in. A unique physical hunter hit chain with a triple striking third hit. I don't know what the hit chain will be exactly, if it's only a triple strike or if the attacks also have different attack speed for something like Kins, but it's definitely very interesting what that will mean. Because triple striking could mean it's multiple shots fired in different directions with multiple daggers, and that makes most sense to me. Or it could mean that they are more concentrated, more closer together, and can all land on the same target. And the question is, does that mean they could actually do triple damage? Could they triple crit? Are they separate instances? Do they get reduced when you hit multiple of the same target? Is it maybe a bit like ESET? There are many options in how exactly this could work, but I want to see it, and that's why she probably doesn't have that much range. It probably offsets this a little bit. And then she has a basic attack stim and a basic attack focused kit wide. A charge up ability that widens a hit area as she charges. That one sounds very satisfying as well if you can hit multiple targets, but it's unusual for a hunter ability to widen. So that could be something that will often just get fired instantly on a single target, but maybe not. Maybe it's also good for clearing that way. A passive with strong gameplay parallels to her father, Poseidon. So probably something where you get rewarded for using a lot of abilities or basic attacks and maybe get more movement speed or extra damage output if you do a lot of damage basically. So something that keeps the flow of the battle going. The ability to temporarily transform into a giant whirlpool through her movement ability. This part I think is really cool. It's probably going to be like Vladimir in League of Legends, and at least in some way we have the whirlpool in the kit that way as well. And then there is a hard-hitting skill shot ultimate that allows her to fire it again if she gets a kill with it. From the trailer, I would assume that hers is not going to be like Scylla's in a circle, but rather a line that goes forward, and the more basically just charging at someone. We'll see if that will actually be the case, but could be very cool. And it's very nice that she gets the same ultimate reset mechanic, even though I'm almost a little bit more scared of having that on a hunter along with their also strong basic attack damage. The Whirlpool and the Serpent, the Daughters of Destruction, the dynamic duo Scylla and Charybdis are finally reunited in Smite's next update. Zeus better watch his back. In conclusion, I think she has a very interesting sounding kit with a lot of unique features that could be very interesting together, but there is a risk of her having to be overtuned in order to work and potentially otherwise ending up a bit weak with a shorter range. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Hi-Rez chose to balance that and how that plays out. We will learn more about that in the update show in the next days. If you want to hear more information about that, then feel free to subscribe if you haven't yet, so you get notified of it as well. And other than that, I will be doing a lot of New World content finally in the next days, now that the beta has ended. So if you'd like to see that, feel free to click sub as well. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks to my patrons for making this video possible. That is That Nick Walker, Dwayne Brannon, Zalaria, Zed the Undead, Nevitz Jr., Rawas, Angel, Eric's88, and Z Feroli, as well as everyone else you see here.